The Zodiac killer first emerged in the long shadow of the late 1960s, when Northern California was still digesting the cultural earthquake of the Summer of Love. The killings began on Lake Herman Road, just outside Benicia, on the night of December 20th, 1968. A young couple parked in a turnout were shot to death beside their station wagon. There were no eyewitnesses. There were no immediate suspects. The case might have remained a regional tragedy, filed away as a robbery gone wrong if not for what came next. In July of 1969, a second double shooting at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo left another woman dead and a young man critically wounded. Less than an hour after the attack, a man called the Vallejo Police Department from a payphone. Calmly, almost casually, he confessed and added that he had also committed the Lake Herman Road murders months earlier. A few weeks later, 3 nearly identical letters arrived at Bay Area newspapers: the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald. Each contained details of the murders that only the killer could have known. Each was signed with a strange symbol, a circle bisected by a cross, and each contained a third of a cryptogram which the writer demanded be printed on the front page. This was the moment the case changed. The killer wasn't just murdering, he was writing. He was performing, and that meant for the first time investigators had something they had never had before, a sample of his handwriting. Over the months that followed, the Zodiac escalated. In late September 1969, 2 college students were attacked at Lake Berryessa by a man wearing an executioner's hood emblazoned with the same crosshair symbol. The female victim died from her injuries. The male survivor lived to describe the attacker's strange, ritualistic behavior. Before leaving, the killer walked over to the couple's parked vehicle and with a black felt-tip pen, wrote on the car door. He listed the dates of his prior attacks. He signed it with the crosshair. 2 weeks later, in October of 1969, a San Francisco taxi driver named Paul Stein was shot in the head in the wealthy neighborhood of Presidio Heights. The killer tore a piece of Stein's blood-stained shirt and walked calmly away, passing within feet of 3 teenagers watching from a window across the street. 3 days later, the Chronicle received another letter. It contained a piece of Stein's shirt, and it contained a threat that the Zodiac would shoot out the tires of a school bus and pick off the children one by one as they came off. By the time the writing campaign ended, the Zodiac had sent more than 20 letters and cards to newspapers and to police, including 4 cryptograms, one of which would not be solved until December of 2020, 51 years after it was mailed. Investigators had a body of writing unprecedented for a serial killer of that era. Page after page of slanted, cursive, idiosyncratic spelling, distinctive letter formations. The handwriting was, in many ways, the killer's true face. He had no name. He had no body. He had no usable fingerprint identification at the time, but he had a signature not in the artistic sense, but in the forensic sense. Every loop, every break, every spacing decision was a fingerprint of its own. The question became, could the experts read it back to him? The case came to rest, in large part, on the desk of Sherwood Morrill, California's chief question documents examiner at the time. Morrill was widely regarded as one of the foremost handwriting experts in the country. He had spent decades comparing forged checks, ransom notes, and threatening letters across hundreds of cases. The Zodiac correspondence became, in many ways, the case of his career. Morrill identified a constellation of distinctive traits in the Zodiac's writing. Certain capital letters were unusually formed. The slant of the script was consistent across documents, even where the killer attempted to disguise certain features. Spelling errors recurred, the same words misspelled the same way. Punctuation was peculiar but consistent. Whoever was writing these letters was the same single person writing every time. Of that Morrill was certain. What he could not do, what no one could, was attach those letters to a name. The most famous suspect in the Zodiac investigation became a man named Arthur Lee Allen. Allen, a former elementary school teacher from Vallejo, came to police attention in 1971 through a man named Don Cheney, a former friend who told investigators that Allen had openly spoken about killing couples and signing letters with a crosshair, more than a year before the murders began. Allen fit aspects of the physical description given by the surviving witnesses. He owned weapons. He had geographic ties to multiple crime scenes. When detectives executed a search warrant on his trailer in 1991, they reportedly recovered items of concern, including knives. But there was a problem. Sherwood Morrill examined samples of Allen's known handwriting and compared them, line by line, to the Zodiac letters. His conclusion was unambiguous. Allen was not the writer. The slant was different. The letter formation was different. The signature features that Morrill had spent years identifying in the Zodiac's writing simply did not appear in Allen's. A second expert, Lloyd Cunningham of the California Department of Justice, later reviewed the case and reached the same conclusion. Whatever else investigators believed about Arthur Lee Allen, he did not write the Zodiac letters. For some detectives, that finding was the end of the road. For others, particularly inspectors who had pursued Allen for decades, it was a frustrating wall. They believed in their suspect. The handwriting refused to agree. Arthur Lee Allen died of natural causes in 1992, never charged, never tried, never convicted. The handwriting expert had spoken. The expert's verdict held. Forensic document examination is not graphology. Graphology, the practice of inferring personality from the shape of letters, is regarded by mainstream forensic science as pseudoscience. What Morrill and Cunningham did was something different and more rigorous, the comparison of measurable, repeatable features of one writing sample to another. But the Zodiac's letters do reveal something about the man behind them, even without the leap into graphology. They reveal a writer who craved attention. The Zodiac did not just kill, he announced. He demanded front-page placement. He boasted of victims he likely never actually claimed. He invented mythologies around himself, including a chilling reference to collecting what he called slaves for the afterlife. Forensic psychiatrists and behavioral analysts who have studied the letters over the decades describe a writer with a profound need for recognition, a fascination with cryptography, and a strong streak of grandiosity. The misspellings appear deliberate in some passages, possibly an attempt to disguise his education level, possibly a genuine reflection of it. The cryptograms suggest someone with at least a passing knowledge of basic ciphers, military codes, or logic puzzles. What is perhaps most striking is the discipline. Across years of correspondence, the writer maintained character. He never slipped into a different voice. He never accidentally signed a real name. The handwriting itself, even where disguised in places, never broke into the full, natural script of an unguarded moment. This is unusual. Most letter-writing offenders, especially across long time spans, eventually betray themselves. They get sloppy. They reveal personal details. They misjudge the meaning of a word that turns out to be unique to a region or a profession. The Zodiac, by contrast, wrote with an almost professional restraint. Whoever he was, he understood that his writing was evidence, and he treated it that way. The handwriting, then, is not just a piece of forensic data. It is a psychological portrait. A portrait of someone who wanted desperately to be seen, but who never made the mistake of being known. CTA, 1213 Min, cold cases like the Zodiac remind us that justice is not always swift and not always certain, but it is always pursued. If you find yourself drawn to the unanswered questions, to the evidence that still waits patiently in case files for someone to take a fresh look, consider subscribing to the channel. We dig into the cases that history almost forgot, the ones whose silence is loudest. Every subscriber helps us bring the next case to light. Outro, 1315 Min. The Zodiac case remains officially unsolved. Modern DNA technology has been applied to envelope flaps and stamps recovered from the original letters, but the results to date have been described by investigators as inconclusive. Theories continue to circulate. New names surface every few years. Old names resurface with new claims. None has yet produced the match that would finally close the file. What endures more than half a century later is the handwriting itself, page after page, sealed in evidence, still waiting. The slant of the letters, the crosshair signature, the deliberate taunting voice of someone who wanted to be remembered and refused to be caught. Forensic handwriting analysis did not solve this case, but it did do something else. It told investigators, again and again with confidence, who the Zodiac was not. And in a case built almost entirely on absences, no body, no fingerprint, no confession, that may be the most honest answer the science could give. The Zodiac wrote his way into history, and then in his own deliberate, looping hand, he wrote himself out of it. For more than half a century, the Zodiac killer has remained one of America's most haunting unsolved cases. Between 1968 and 1974, the killer terrorized Northern California and then began writing dozens of letters, each marked with a crosshair signature, each containing details only the killer could have known. With no body, no usable fingerprint, and no confession to work from, investigators turned to one of the only physical pieces of evidence the killer had left behind, his own handwriting. This documentary explores the forensic battle that followed, the painstaking work of California's top question documents experts, the suspects whose samples were examined and rejected, and what the writing itself reveals about the psychology of the man behind the pen. From the first letters of 1969 to the cryptograms that took over 50 years to crack, this is the story of a case decided not by what investigators found, but by what they could never quite prove. 00, 00, the question that won't die, 00. 15 inside the Zodiac files, 01. 00, a killer emerges in Northern California, 03. 00, the letters begin, 06. 00, Sherwood Morals verdict, 09. 00, the psychology of the pen, 12. 00, cases we almost forgot, 13. 00, what the handwriting still says, true crime Zodiacular cold case unsolved mystery forensics, a note on factual framing. The original prompt title implied a Zodiac suspect was convicted by handwriting evidence. The Zodiac case is officially unsolved. No suspect has ever been charged or convicted. I adjusted the title and framing so the script stays inside verified facts, Morals and Cunningham's exclusion of Arthur Lee Allen, the documented letters and attacks, the 2020 cipher solve, per the verified facts only requirement.